Today, we're going to be diving into level 3 of the Rust Iceberg. If you think you know everything about the video game that is Rust, wait until you get to some of these, because we're going to be talking about some crazy stuff that was suggested, was implemented into the game, and does exist, but a lot of players just don't know about it. To start things off, we've got a juicy one. This is a Rust skin that could only be obtained by spending almost $1,000. I'm not talking about in a secondary market. I'm talking about $1,000 to buy this skin. And of course, I'm talking about the Secret Lab chair skin. So this skin came with a real-life chair, or you could say the real-life chair actually came with a skin. So for those of you who don't know, Secret Labs is a pretty reputable gaming chair. I've got one, it's pretty nice, but they made a Rust-themed version of that chair. And as a bonus for buying the chair, you would also get a Secret Labs chair blueprint that you could use to craft Secret Labs chairs in the game Rust. I thought it was pretty cool. It's an interesting way to sort of tie real life and virtual items together. Obviously, I don't think you can sell this. You can't trade the item. So whoever buys that chair gets that skin. On the secondary market, you can only buy the real life Secret Labs chair. Next up would be punishment for suicide. So basically, to keep players from just killing themselves and respawning over and over again, the idea was there would be some sort of punishment for suicide. One of them would be a longer and longer respawn timer. This also ties into things that we've talked about in previous levels of the iceberg, like handcuffs, which might prevent a player from committing suicide. And in addition to that, you've got people suggesting things like players would lose all blueprint knowledge or some blueprint knowledge. Players would have a limited number of suicides they could commit per wipe. And things like players would lose max health when they did it. So instead of starting or being able to get up to 100 max health, now you could only get up to 99 or something like that. Anyways, it looks like in the end, Face Punch decided that that respawn timer is a good way to go about punishing players for suicide. Next up, we've got Microsoft's proposal. And this one is interesting because it could have completely changed the way that you play Rust. Currently, you're playing it either on the console or on the PC. You're going in through Steam or you're going in through the App Store. Well, if this proposal had gone through, it is likely that we would have seen Rust being a free game on Game Pass. That's right, players with Game Pass could have played the game completely for free. It probably would have been optimized better for the Xbox. It might not have even come to PlayStation, and on the PC, maybe it would be taken off the Steam store, because Microsoft's proposal was they were thinking about actually buying the game, but it never came to fruition because Microsoft blew their whole budget on Ninja and Mixer. Next up, we've got the Caretaker, and this one's actually really interesting. So the Caretaker was basically something that could have come into Rust instead of Bradley. So the idea would be, instead of introducing just generic sort of tanks and planes and stuff like that, the Caretaker would be a robot that would have a few different modes. So this is a robot that could be player owned, or it could be sort of protecting a monument. And when no players were around, no gunshots would fire, it would be in sort of just this like hibernative state. Once a gunshot was heard, the robot would activate and go towards those gunshots, hunting down the players that had fired those shots. So it could be something that would come in with airdrops. Maybe it would just sit there vacant until it heard a fight going on. It would sit around monuments until it heard a fight going on. And it could even be something that a player would own and stick around their base to protect themselves. It sounds like a really cool concept, and I would have loved to see robots being introduced into Rust. I know they're doing it a little bit with drones and everything like that, but this sounds like a whole another level. And because of the way I see the game going right now, I'm thinking maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that they might implement this one, and that would be sick. Next up, we've got sharks. So yeah, sharks are in the game, but basically the concept would be to add sharks into the ocean, and they would attack people, because that's what sharks do, obviously. And after that, we've got blood bags. And this is an interesting one because this was an item that was actually added to the game, but it had no use case whatsoever, and nobody knows what exactly the devs plan to do with it. It was a stackable item. You could get it from airdrops and barrels, but that's about all that it ever did. It just sat in your inventory and took up space until the devs eventually removed blood bags, and nobody ever knew what they planned to do with them. And next up, we've got fire extinguishers. So someone over at Face Punch was watching Harry Potter one day, and they thought it would be awesome if we could introduce broomsticks into the game. Unfortunately, broomsticks had been copyrighted, so to get around copyright law, they ended up introducing flying fire extinguishers. Players would be able to grab a fire extinguisher, jump on them, and use it just like a mini copter. And that is all a lie. They just wanted to add fire extinguishers to extinguish fire and water plants. If you really believe that one, you should look up at your ceiling because there's probably gullible written on it. Next up, we've got multiple islands. So this was an interesting idea that it's been brought up many times. So first off, you've got maps that would just have multiple islands on them and players could vote around to the maps. It'd be just sort of like if you've ever played Age of Empires or any of those strategy games where every player starts off on their own island. That was something that some people had in mind. So basically you're playing Pirates of the Caribbean in Rust. Other people thought there'd maybe be a couple different islands, some of them larger, some of them smaller, with different resources, different monuments on them. And players could pick which island they wanted to go on. And if you picked a very low pop island, you wouldn't have as much competition. And if you're really into PvP, you pick an island with a ton of monuments on it. For other people, what multiple islands means is islands were individual servers and players could take their character from island to island in Rust. Some of these would be level capped, some of these would just be players could pick and choose the island, but instead of going to just that sort of boring server menu, you had this concept of islands where you could just take a boat out of your map and it would bring you into sort of your server picking tool. You could pick a new server and you go in with everything you brought with them. Obviously, given the way that Rust went with custom servers and everything like that, it would be a little bit ridiculous to introduce something like that. So multiple islands were never introduced, but there are maps out there that you can play that consist of multiple islands. So yeah, it sort of does exist. Next up, we've got the Demonic Pistol. This is a pistol skin or semi-automatic pistol skin that dropped in Rust. You could only get it through golden barrels, and the reason for this is supposedly there is a typo in the skin. Base Punch never intended to release this skin, but it accidentally got added to the skins that could drop from a golden barrel. It was said to be this massive accident. Players went nuts because of this and were buying this pistol for over $1,000. At its height, someone supposedly paid $2,000 for this skin. It's now worth $84. Imagine that. Oof. Next up, we've got Large Oil Refinery. If you've ever played Rust, you know that the small oil refinery is a thing. You're going to find them at some monuments, and you can find them at your base if you loot one and put it down right in front of your base. It is used to refine oil to make low-grade oil. The idea behind a large oil refinery would basically be it's the same thing as a large furnace. You could put down a large oil refinery and refine larger amounts of oil at once. It was never really implemented into the game. Whether or not it may be implemented into the game still remains to be seen, but there was work done on a large oil refinery deployable, so there's always the possibility that's just sitting in the backlogs and might get released one day. Next up, we have unused boats. So way back in the day, one of the lead designers for Rust actually made a trip over to Russia. He was in Moscow and managed to see pictures of Putin's mega yacht. He was extremely inspired by these pictures and decided to design a mega yacht himself for Rust. It was actually put into the game files. Data miners did find it. Unfortunately, the lead designer fell down a flight of stairs and sadly passed away before this could be released to the public. Base Punch did play with the idea of releasing this, but it's said to be a cursed item because anyone who ever tries to release it ends up falling down a flight of stairs, out a window, or slipping in their bathtub. But yeah, unused boats, I have no idea actually what it is. I think it might just be referring to boats that were on the shore before and now they're not. You have to go to a fishing village to buy them for the most part. But let's be honest, my lore is much better. Next up, we've got half floors. This one, I'm not really sure why it's level 3 in the iceberg. I know I'm probably missing this by a mile, but half floors are basically just, you put in a half wall and put a floor on top of it, and you've got just one sort of floor in the middle of where you usually have 2 floors built. It's a very common building thing that everybody knows about, so I highly doubt that is what this is referring to. But yeah, maybe there's a glitch or something like that that I'm not familiar with. I did do some digging, but I couldn't come up with anything. So next up, we've got hog riding. So the idea here was people could actually have rideable animals, and like horses, you had pigs. So yeah, instead of seeing a player riding around on a majestic horse, they'd be running around on a porky pig. Or someone also did suggest war bears. I really like that idea. Get a bear in like armor, you get on top of it, you're doing battle with someone, the bear's doing battle. It could be pretty epic. And to follow up War Bears, we have supply boxes or building supply boxes. So this was actually added into the Rust code but removed for some reason. And the idea behind this would be there would be boxes that would drop with building supplies. You could get wood, metal, high quality metal, or stone in addition to doors, garage doors, armored doors, and everything in between. And last but not least, we have natural disasters. And no, I'm not talking about Fancy Orb's latest and greatest video. It is a killer, but this is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about natural disasters that would randomly occur on a map. This would be everything from tornadoes to hurricanes to earthquakes to massive fires. And what these natural disasters would do really did vary. So in some cases with a tornado, it would take out any building with a low stability. So if you had a floor that had 25% stability, a tornado might come through and completely remove that floor. Other theories were that these natural disasters would take out different levels of items. So maybe a earthquake would knock down something like wood but not stone, or maybe it would knock down stone but not wood. And then you've got fires, which would basically just ravage anything that was made out of wood, including trees. It's a really interesting concept, and I think there could be some really cool dynamics behind adding natural disasters to Rust. It would make the game a lot more chaotic, a lot more unexpected, and it would add just another element of surprise and storytelling to the game. Imagine watching a Frost video or Blueprint video. They're talking about how this game was going, how the wipe was going amazing, and then in the middle of raiding a massive clan base, a tornado touches down. They're firing through the tornado. It's pulling bullets in. It's wrecking raid bases. It's wrecking the clan base. People are scattering. They don't know who's on whose team. They're shooting each other. Everything's going nuts. And then after the tornado goes away, a hurricane comes in, floods the map, and they all drown anyways. It'd be an amazing story. I'd love to see at least a couple like that. But yeah, natural disasters, that would be something that would be awesome to add to the game. But that's all we've got for level 3 of the Rust Iceberg. We've still got level 4 to go, and that's got some of the most crazy things in it, including the accident, nuclear weapons, extinction, and robots.